So the agenda this afternoon, I'm going to do some context setting by talking about bank transformation and open banking using APIs, gleaned from our experience working with European and UK banks. Then we're going to be talking about why the right solution is not necessarily just an API management layer. We'll then switch over to a very brief demo on WIPRO's open banking API platform, followed by Ishmael will be talking about the API, open banking standards, followed by some question and answers. So this slide is just scene setting. What we see from the mid-2000s were the original pioneers of open APIs. They were the CRM, search, and e-commerce companies. And then at the bottom left of the graph, you see the exponential growth as the traditional industries suddenly jumped onto the bandwagon, trying to exploit it the way the previous industries had. And what's noticeable is that banking as an industry has been pretty resistant to open banking, which is understandable given that it's going to eat their lunch and destroy potentially a lot of their revenue models. But however, this has come back with a vengeance now that open banking has regulatory muscle behind it, forcing the banks to start implementing in 2017. So the current context of payments, what we have at the bottom of the screen is the banking or payments infrastructure, which is reliable, it's trusted, and there's end-to-end reach, there's plenty of reach. And there's even some incremental innovation at that layer. We see things like a current account switching and PayM, which is tinkering with the infrastructure by adding a mobile phone number proxy. However, what is glaringly obvious is there's a void in the services layer. There's no competition there. There was very little competition there. Therefore, no innovation, and that's bad for the customer. So this is a picture of the end state, if you like, that the regulators would like to see, the payments infrastructure with a fintech open banking layer on top of it. And what we will then see is that fintechs collaborating with the banks and non-banks in order to reimagine the customer proposition to create new value. So under the hood, what does this look like? There are three pillars. Of course, the first pillar, there is the external compliance, addressing the compliance issues that we all have been talking about the past 2 days. There's also an internal aspect, driving the digital agenda, implementing microservices to optimize the two-speed architecture that exists within all the incumbent banks at the moment. And thirdly, the custom industry-led outside-in layer. So if any of you heard the talk by PwC earlier, you'll be well aware of the activity in this space. And so it's down to the bank. The opportunity exists for it to be on the front foot to build new propositions in this area. Again, what does this mean, this opportunity? So in a nutshell, it's becoming more intimate with the customers, with their customers, and they are central at the moment. They are the incumbents, so they have an inherent advantage here. So using their incumbency to build the partner ecosystem, again, we saw from the PwC presentation earlier what this means. Seizing the opportunity to be the banker for this new platform. And this is the TPP agenda, which is all of what PSD2 is about. And finally, leveraging the internal silos that will be broken down by virtue of using an API approach and allowing internal capabilities to be configured in new ways which are not possible now because of the roadblocks and blockages within the SDLC. This is a diagram which I liked very much when I first saw. It's highly complex, but it illustrates the expanding roles of the bank on the dimensions of product creation and also distribution. I'm not going to go into the details of it unless anyone wants to talk about it later, but suffice to say that it really illustrates the need for bank architecture to be flexible enough to not just deal with today's business model, but allow the bank to evolve to another model, whether it wants to go up, right, or diagonally to the right, and thereby be able to create value where existing business models are being disrupted. This final slide, which I want to talk about before handing over to my colleague Nagesh, is a consolidation of some of the challenges that we've seen across Europe and in the UK and the banks that we work with. I'm not going to go through each bullet, but just call out a couple. The regulatory timeline. We all know that the first implementation is next year, and we're now towards the end of 2016. So that's going to require a solution that allows for accelerated delivery. We also know that open banking and PSD2 rules are not fixed yet, and they won't be fixed until next year. So therefore, we're going to need a methodology to allow the agile delivery on top of the potential first wave of development that we do now. And finally, at the bottom, when the APIs are finally developed and they're put to market, we're going to need an ecosystem to be able to manage all these APIs coherently and not let it go into a runaway mess, which, again, our PwC colleagues talked about earlier. So therefore, we need more than just a straightforward API management system. And this is where I'm going to hand over to my colleague Nagesh, who's going to dive into this a little bit more.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, David. So we were talking about some of the challenges, right? Now, pretty much we have a lot of gateways available, like API management products that are available. That will, of course, let you expose APIs. But is that sufficient, and let you expose and manage some of these APIs? But is that quite sufficient for you to, really get to the market, look at these APIs as products, right? And then manage this entire ecosystem that you really want to build. So what would you typically need? Of course, a complete an API agile creation and delivery framework, which will manage your end-to-end life cycle, all the way from the requirements to the testing and further on, right? The entire delivery framework of this entire API stack. You will also need a supported DevOps solution, which will basically take your API, which could just evolve today with few functionalities, to a full-fledged API tomorrow, because nobody can get into this this at the day one, right? And of course, for you to really understand how is your API doing, all the way from API users, the app users, right, the developers, you will need a full stack monitoring and analytics kind of a solution, right? So, and next is, so the internal aspect of it is creating and delivering an API. However, the external aspect of it is managing the entire ecosystem, wherein the entire partner base, which of course our PwC colleagues were talking about in the morning, right, and many more yesterday as well. So we are looking at more from the partner ecosystem management rather than just exposing APIs. Exposing APIs is just one part of it, but how do you really get these guys develop apps? Put these apps on an app store, right? And then make these APIs available easily for the developers to develop. How can we make these APIs uniform, right, from the bank's perspective. Now you can look at partnering with various other additional functionality providers like personal finance management, financial analytics, which may provide some APIs, but you cannot expose those APIs straight onto your developers, because the learning curve to understand your bank API with your partner API differs. Right? So how do you make them look uniform to your developers? That is one of the crucial aspects. So that's where our API partner onboarding management tool would help you deliver those, right? And obviously there are multiple roles, multiple user roles that are part of this platform, right? For example, you can take an API developer, you can take an app developer, app end user, right? And and the internal and external partners who are onboarding their APIs. So you'll have to manage these roles, and so you will need some kind of an exhaustive identity bridging, identity brokering protocol that you will need, right? And similarly, how do you get these apps and apps to the marketplace, to the market via our marketplace that's available as part of, right? And so the whole API, when you get these APIs out to the door, it's obviously not perfect on the day one. So you will need a mechanism to evolve all of this. So the way you will do that is by collecting feedback from the app users and the API users day in and day out. Now, how are you going to do that is, you could use multiple feedback mechanism tools, right, which I'm going to show a little later, which will help you, get to this evolution of this whole, API and the apps from the day one. Now, lastly but not least, regulatory adherence. So that's anyway there as part of our life. Yes. So how do you get there quicker? David was talking about the timelines. So how do you get there quicker? Is by using prepackaged, maintained specifications. In fact, our colleague here, Ismail, is come here now. Yeah, with Ismail, we are building a prepackaged open bank project APIs on our platform, which is maintained, managed by us, and exposed to you as one of the option of regulatory industry APIs. In fact, we are also looking at W3C standards, IBAN. So we want to make your life easy to get to the regulatory adherence aspect of it. So now this is all completely enabled by WIPRO, all the way from gateway software to the entire ecosystem aspect of it. Now, what does it really contain, right? So we have the consumers on the top, and we have obviously the banks, and the assets on the bottom. Now, one critical aspect, as I spoke, API management, yes, and it obviously does all the gateway, runtime, dev portal aspects of it. Then there are multiple tools that are involved in creating an API enablement, right? Like, for example, a designer tool which not only creates a specification for you, but also integrated with a UML tool that will keep both your API specification as well as the UML, the design of building the API aspect of it together, right? And that can be managed together. Now, Lifecycle Manager would allow you to basically move these APIs along the development lifecycle from one environment to another environment, depending on the stakeholder's decision, saying, hey, yes, my testing is 80%. Okay, let me move it to the next one. Or my specification is good enough, let me move it to the next level, right? So the life cycle is not just the versioning, but the entire API creation and deployment aspect of it. And then the cloud controller, which is very interesting. So all these APIs that gets auto-generated comes with an agent, and that agent keeps feeding back to a central monitoring tool, which can basically tell you, it's of course configurable, but it can actually tell you, how these APIs are doing in any environment. Is it up, running, down? And depending on that, your DevOps tool can take some decisions as to should I scale up or scale down these APIs, right? And the whole ecosystem marketplace aspect of it, which I spoke about, we have in fact started working with Yodlee as one of our partner, and a few more, where we would want to bring in these APIs on this platform, pre-packaged, pre-available, so that banks can make use of it, or the other option is to get your partners onboarded onto this platform, so that this whole ecosystem can be generated out of this platform that you're using, right? And I spoke about the identity brokering, and the subscription management. So obviously there are various different app developers who wants to subscribe to your APIs, partner APIs. You would want to probably white label those partner APIs, right? And then manage the subscription aspect of the entire ecosystem. Now, standardized, as I said, Open Bank project, PSD2 APIs, the W3C payments APIs, right? And the whole sandboxing has been automated in this, where you could take this prepackaged APIs, create sandboxes, test them for a while, right? And then manage subscription on these sandboxes, and then take it to production once you're happy with those sandboxes, right? So the entire aspect has been built on top of. Now let me very quickly kind of a checkbox, if you would like to call it, right? So some of the challenges we are trying to address, right? And of course, the one which is in orange is obviously how do you want to really generate revenue streams is all dependent on how aggressive, how market-oriented your APIs are. So that is that's why the innovative apps and API aspect of it comes in picture. So that's something not quantified, if you want to call it. That's why it is orange. However, we are trying to address pretty much most of the challenges. Let me quickly take you through a 5-minute, very high-level demo, right, which is a pre-recorded. I'm going to talk through, but it will give you a quick intro into the entire platform. So here I'll be showing. Okay, sorry about that. Didn't realize it was not on the screen. Come on. I didn't record a blank one, sorry. Yeah, all right. So, here I'll be showing you how the marketplace is available. The pre-built industry APIs are available for you to create sandboxes, and the entire the APIs that banks are building to manage the life cycle of this whole API creation and delivery, right? So yeah, so this whole platform is available either on per consumption basis on our cloud, right? Or it could be in fact installed on your on-premise as well. Now within the subscription APIs, so we have got Yodlee APIs already on this marketplace. We've got OBP, PSD2 APIs where developers can come in, and either subscribe to these APIs or try it out on a kind of a developer portal, which also has pre-built SDKs where they can use to create apps, and of course they can get feedback. And we have got WIPRO Homes, which is an artificial intelligence platform that can actually pull out the data from the blogs and forums and give you the evolution aspects of an API. So how do you really want to evolve this API from today to tomorrow, right? So that is that's very strong point there. And in fact, the App Store apparently will give you all the means and ways to upload these apps, the developer internal, external apps, and in fact, they can also do checkouts using PayPal, Google, right? And of course, the entire platform is flexible to be built the way it is you need it. And the pre-built APIs, we have OBP sandbox and the PSD2 sandbox at this point in time created, right? Which you can use. You can use these the documentation, which the developers can look at the documentation, manage these sandboxes. You can create sandboxes on your own, and manage the subscription API keys, right? So using this whole pre-packaged and maintained APIs, you can go ahead and do lots of easy stuff and fret not on the creation of the API itself, right? Now from the whole design aspects and creating your own APIs, right? So now the whole creation of API depends on the life cycle and the SDLC process that you implement in your framework. Now it involves plan and design of APIs, integration and testing, operating and monitor, and manage the different versions and versions of not just the specification, but at various artifacts that you are going to create, right? Now within the plan and design aspects, we have integrated with requirements tool. For example, right now we have integrated with Trello, where you can actually create these requirements. And once you've created the requirements, we have a UI to generate the specification. Of course, many tools give you those specification generation. In fact, we also have, you can generate either Swagger or RAML specification, and then come in and create these UML diagrams. And once all these artifacts that are part of the design have been created, you can come in and say, hey, okay, now let me create a code for this particular API. Now you can choose Node.js, Java. We're going to add more, right? And then now once, this is very interesting, where once I have got this Node.js or the framework that I have chosen to create these APIs, now you would want to curate some of the libraries that your developers, internal API developers, wants to use, right? For example, logging. I don't want a developer just to download some code from npm modules and use it on his own. So now you want to curate some of them. So if we have a module which basically auto injects this library into the skeleton code that is being generated. So the developers or the API developers, life is easy to create these APIs. No, he doesn't want to really worry about having, thinking about what logging should I use, or what, what other frameworks that are libraries that I am supposed to use, right? Now, once this API has been created, you definitely have, you would want to really look at how traceable my APIs are with these requirements. So I have a traceability matrix, which again pulls out requirements from your requirement analysis tool, and the APIs from the specification, and then you can build your own traceability matrix on top of that. Now, this whole DevOps thing kicks in once you've created your skeleton code, and you can use various DevOps related tool to actually integrate and test these APIs. Now, from the monitoring aspects, as I was telling you, there is an agent pre-built as part of this. This agent would send in information like, For example, errors, how many number of APIs hits, all the way. It can also be business related, monitoring if you want to really do that, right? And pumped into this this tool so that this can tell you, hey, there are 400 type error, about 17,000 errors in this whole entire year, right? And it also can give you API metrics, basically, which can tell you how long was this API up and running in a specific environment. It could be, dev, QA, prod, pre-prod. So this metrics is like a historical collection of data and tell you, hey, this specific API was available at, for this number of time a day, right? And then there is the entire lifecycle manager, which will basically give you access to create, to move these APIs all the way from your development to production environment. And that ends the demo. So if you want to really know more, please reach out to us. And yeah, and we are here. Nagesh.deshpande@wipro.com, david.lee6@wipro.com. So please reach out to us at any point in time to know more. I would now like to hand over to Ismail to talk about, more about Open Banking Project and what we are doing together. Right, thank you.
So my name is Ismail Shaib. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Tisobi, the company behind the Open Bank Project. And what I really briefly want to tell you about is, after the presentation of Nagesh, is basically a little bit about the Open Bank Project. I'm sure you've heard about it yesterday and today, but most importantly, I want to tell you why in this realm, in this area where you can build all sorts of APIs and your own APIs, why is it a good thing to adopt a standard API? Why is it good to go ahead with something which is already existing? So just like basically quick, I think some of you may have seen this slide yesterday. Really the vision behind the Open Bank Project is one API for every bank. Can you hear me in the back, by the way, if I speak without the mic? All right, cool, thank you. So like the core vision, and it started in 2010 by Simon, is really this idea of providing banks with an API. So every bank would have an API in the future with which it would interact and engage with third-party developers, right? So, banks, instead of providing you with just one application which should fit with all your needs, they would provide you with an ecosystem of apps out of which you, the consumer, will be able to cherry pick and choose the apps that cater to your own need. Now, the key thing with this, and the key sort of insight that Simon had with this, is that these interfaces, these APIs, should be standard, should be the same when provided with banks. And why the reasons for that are something I'll try to explain, or at least our point of view is something I'll try to explain later. Just maybe a bit about the Open Bank Project. So Open Bank Project is the leading open source API solution for banks. We work with a bit more than 20 bank clients all over Europe and abroad. We have 5,000 developers using our APIs, and we're actually a German company. We're based in Berlin, and we provide three things really. So the first one is an open standard, so a set of pre-built APIs. Today we have 115 APIs solely focused on banking. So we only do banking, and it's APIs around PSD2, so access to account, transaction, payment, but there's a bit more than that. So we cover also KYC checks, card management, etc., etc. So set of 115 APIs. So we looked at banking, and we said throughout the years, right? It took us 5 years to get to this point. So we looked at the industry and tried to figure out what are the things that should be opened, and in which way, what's the best way to open up these resources, right? What is a way to open up these resources so that they make sense for developers, so that developers would consume them, right? So the first pillar is really this idea of standard set of APIs. The second is a middleware, is an actual software which encodes all these 115 APIs. So we have an API stack which is deployed behind the bank firewall, connect to the core banking, and exposes a set of 115 APIs. And then the third pillar, which is in my opinion, very important and quite unique, is the access to the community of developers. So not only Open Bank project gives you access to certain technology, but also it gives you access to a global community of developers, of fintech startups, which are familiar with these interfaces, with these APIs, which already build apps and which the bank can leverage. So that's more or less what the Open Bank project is. Very sort of schematically, I don't know if it doesn't look really good, but basically we, as I was saying, we integrate into the core banking of the bank. We can be enhanced by API management solutions we talked about. So Nagra showed an example of how that works. And then we expose those APIs to the outside world, and we expose them mainly to the developer community, which we already have, right? So these 5,000 developers across the planet who are using these APIs to build apps. So just to give you maybe examples of apps that we have. So here in the UK, there's an app called Heidi, which basically tracks your transaction, analyzes your transaction, and then tells you, this week you can save £100. Would you like to do so? And then it puts £100 in your savings account, right? Basically based on the analysis of the transactions. We have an app in Ireland which again tracks your transaction and then tells you, you're using O2, you're paying £15 a month for your mobile bill. If you use 3, you will pay £10 and you will gain £5. So there's all these sort of use cases and innovative applications which are enabled by APIs. Now the key question for me, and also from the discussion I had over the last 2 days, is why is using a pre-existing set of APIs, as we were discussing, why is that essential? And I think there are 3 key responses to that. First is faster time to market. Obviously, it's already, the bank doesn't have to design the APIs by themselves, and we know, if we have we know that the time for design and coming up with the semantics and agreeing on what is to be opened may take lots of time. So there's clearly a faster time to market by using a pre-existing set of APIs. Secondly, it's also incorporate a certain set of best practice regulation. You were talking about PSD2. We can talk about open banking here in the UK. So that existing set of APIs will incorporate the regulatory requirement, but also best practice, right? Throughout the years, we have learned a certain number of things which are embodied into our API standard, right? And these things that we learn, these best practice, come from 2 sides. And my worry and my fear is that if you are a bank and you're building your own set of APIs, you will probably be very good at learning, at incorporating just one type of learning, which is the learning which comes from the bank, right? So you would be very good at, because you failed in certain things in the past, purely on the banking side, you will incorporate those learnings. But what about the learnings which comes from dealing with developers? When we talk about open APIs, we're talking about APIs which are public, which are used by third parties, which are used by people who have zero knowledge of banking, right? Who are not bankers themselves, who do not know the business and the logic behind it. So are we catering to these people? Are we embodying, are we including those best practice, and are we providing the developer experience which is on par with developer experience provided by, say, the Stripe or the Twitter and the Facebook of the world? Because that's really where the benchmark is, right? So I think that's really a key point. The second key point is, are we really getting those best practice into our catalog? And then thirdly, and most importantly, and I touched upon this before, it's really the developer community, right? If you are building your own set of APIs, that's great. You probably would be able to do that. There's no problem about it. But are you going to attract as many developers? Are you going to attract the killer apps, the brightest apps and the brightest developers? And do you have the skills and the resource to maintain that relationship and that community? Because I think, we're talking at this conference about APIs, and of course it's a fairly technical topic, and there are lots of technical components to it. But I think there's also a human, if it is to succeed, there's a human component to it. There's this community component, this getting developer to actually use our technology, and that's totally not technical. And I think by using an open standard, by using a set of pre-built APIs which are known, which are self-service, which are promoted and available, and there are sandboxes, they're served by sandboxes, so I don't have to fill in 100 forms to actually get to test it. That helped build the community. That helped build and sustain the community of developers. So with the Open Bank project, again, we have 5,000 developers around the world, and each bank using our set of standard API will be able to tap into this pool and will be able to reuse the existing app, and the support of that pool of developer, the maintaining that ecosystem of developer, that's something our team will be doing, and that's something because we have vested interest in having the best and the brightest fintech community out there. And that's something our team is really good at doing, right? And maintaining is skills we already have. It's not something we need to create, opposite to maybe what a bank would have to do. So yeah, to summarize, and that's really my point, I think why you would need to use something which is pre-existing, for me, 3 reasons. It's faster time to market, it embodies, it includes best practice learnings, both from the developer side, the banking side, and regulatory requirements. And then thirdly, it enables you to tap into a much bigger and global community of developers. It enables you to, in a way, outsource the maintenance of this fintech and partner ecosystem. So you would still have control. You would still decide which apps goes into your marketplace. Nagesh was talking about marketplace and so on, so you would still be able to have that level of control. The only extra added value in here, and that's not a small extra added value, is the option, is the possibility to tap into a much bigger and wider group of developers, much bigger pool of apps. And I think that's really critical. And again, like for me, if we talk about the future of open banking, what banks are going to compete on is not necessarily the interfaces. Whether you call your, how to get balance, you call it balance or balances or something else, is not really important. What's really important, who is using this API call? Are they doing something cool with it? Am I getting the brightest developer behind? And the apps that actually are going to be used by consumers. So that's really for me the key into this, to actually getting the opportunity out of open banking. So, and I think, a combination of technology, like the Open Bank project with, WIPRO enables to get to this point. And I think with that, that's all I wanted, that's all the point, really the point I wanted to do, but I really want to have a conversation. So if there are any questions for me, but also for the 3 of us, David and Nagesh, I'll just make sure to grab a mic. I guess I need to turn it to on. All right. All right. Well, you can.
It's okay.
Yeah, you can ask your question.
So,
sure.
Just a question, Ismail. You were talking about how the Open Bank project creates the APIs. So just so in my mind I'm clear, so you have your clients, okay? So for example, we'll take the BBC for example, they store whatever data, they store customer data, X, Y, Z. They then store that data somewhere in a data store, I'm assuming, and then you create the API from the data store to your app, or is it just your app?
No, we create the interfaces, right?
Just the interface.
Yeah, exactly.
So that the client creates everything up until the API that actually interacts with your app.
Yeah, so exactly. So let's take the example of a PFM solution, right? A personal finance management solution, budgeting app. A budgeting app shows a nice pie chart of your spending, for instance, right? The logic of how they draw the pie chart, that's up to the developers to do, right? But the data, the data comes from the bank, right? But the pipes, how the data gets from the bank to the developers in a secure and controlled manner, that's what's designed, what's specified by the Open Bank project.
So when you say developers, you mean your interface developers, your technical developers?
Yeah, technical, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how they illustrate the information?
That's really up to them.
Yeah.
What we do is, so We take the data from the bank
Yeah.
to technical developers, startups, bigger organization, and we deliver it in a certain specific format. Because it's a specific format, people knows beforehand how to use it and how to build against it without having data.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does now. Yeah.
And what I'm saying here is, it's very important. You can have, each bank can have its own format, but then they will have to build communities of developers, each on its own. But it's very important. My point is, it's better to have one standard format for as many banks as possible, because by having a pre-existing format, developers can tap into the format already. They don't need to have the bank using it. They don't need to have actual access to production data.
Yeah.
Because there is a standard format, they can already try and build apps on top, PFM solution, and more creative apps, right? And we see it already with the Open Bank project community.
Just to clarify if I understood correctly,
Sure.
so if you have 5 banks to which Open Bank project has built a layer on,
Yeah.
so they might have their own individual data formats, but and they're having their APIs, just using their APIs to produce a facade layer on top of it with a data format which is common.
So each bank will have its own layer of software, right? It will run its own software, but the software would expose a common interface. Do you see what I mean? So like, let's say we have bank 1, 2, and 3. Bank 1, 2, and 3, they all have separate software. It's in no way connected, you know, it's not like one point of failure, single point of failure. Each bank has its own software, but that software happens to expose the same set of interfaces, right? And because it's the same set of interfaces, it's for, like, you know, an app which is using bank A can also be reused by bank B, if bank B and A accept and wants to use that app. So control stays with the bank.
So all you do is define those common set of interfaces and the bank adapt to them.
But you transport the data. So you'll never store the data. You don't need to have databases.
Yeah. So this is only about like technology. Like, we're technology provider to the bank, right? So it all stays in the bank. It's all behind the bank firewall. It's all really each bank's has its own software. The only common thing between the banks would be the public interfaces.
And that they consent to sharing their data for the greater need of whatever the app is doing.
Yeah, and they consent to, or they consent to share the data with a particular app, right? So the bank has control and decides which banks uses which APIs the bank is providing.
This will include only the public APIs which a bank is going to expose for. This won't cover the internal APIs a bank has?
No, it won't. This is really for third-party developers, but it's not just PSD2. So PSD2 is like 10% of our catalog. So there is 90% more APIs a bank is able to expose. KYC checks, you know, lending products, all these things, right? So there's a lot more to expose than just PSD2. But PSD2 is a good hook. It's a good way to engage on that journey. But then there's the opportunity is a lot bigger, you know, than that. And then of course there is more than today we have 115, but there is more that could, you know, tomorrow it will be 200, right? So hence also the idea that it should be easy to add APIs as well, right? Because there is a lot more which could be added on top in the future, right?
Just the last one. So the 115 APIs you have. I'm sorry.
Sure, no, absolutely.
Again,
sorry.
Is it just the specification or also the implementation?
There is a software, so it's separated, but there is also software. We also have an open source software. It's on GitHub, which encode all these 115 APIs.
So WIPRO calls, just coding it. WIPRO calls open project then calls the bank.
Exactly. Or so basically the 115 APIs will be included into the WIPRO API management solution. And exposed to third parties.
Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to ask what's the governance of this specification? How often do they change? If some bank complies with your specification, it can be if the just to open, then you
Sure.
let's say you make a dependency on this. So
Sure.
how
So-
is this governed?
So it's a typical open source governance model. We have how do you call it, lifetime benefactor, as it were. So, but basically it's a meritocracy. It's open to anyone. People can suggest new solutions, new additions to it, right? And depending on their level of activity, it may or may not be merged into the master branch. And then we have our CEO, Simon Redfern, who's at the head of it, and who makes sure that the community follows a certain number of guidelines and so on. So like a bit like Linux, is handled, right? But it's still open to anyone. Anyone can do pull requests. Once we receive a pull request, we check that it makes sense for us or not, and then we may or may not add it. And also there is a clear roadmap with all the things that we want to add into the API, and we're very transparent about that. So the banks who works with us, they know exactly where we are going, when we are going to get there. So there's, and we also maintain versioning. So depending on the version you have, we would maintain that version as well.
So you have some releases over the year, or?
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a roadmap on the website actually. So with all the features and functionality that we can add, and of course when we work specifically with one particular bank, one bank may want to have extra features and stuff, and that would be like more of a commercial agreement, which do not necessarily go into the open source. So we can extend APIs for particular banks. So that's also possible. But basically, the open source solution is clear open source governance model, a clear transparent roadmap. Oh yeah.
There's a couple of questions on the PSD2 question. I know Scott did a bit of critique of PSD2 earlier on, and obviously it's the retail regulatory technical standards, the RTS standards that the banks have responded to. Is the plan for the Open Bank project to align itself on the recommendations of the RTS?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's sort of would be in your roadmap.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other question I had was, UK banks having to work with the UK open banking for the implementation entity to establish technical standards, which are kind of much more kind of prescriptive and much more standardised in the UK banking scheme. It's not 100% clear how that will align with the rest of the EU, but obviously we'd like them to align. What's the kind of roadmap with regard to the Sobi offering and what we're doing in the UK space?
So again, I think there we're like the same. We're hoping that there would be like that they would align. We're also, so Simon, our CEO, was part of the Open Banking Working Group, which led to the CMA remedies. So we're still part of that. We're still part of that discussion. Of course, we are trying to influence that discussion and at least have the Open Bank project as probably not the final set of APIs, but it's a basis of that discussion, right? Like it's a concrete, and it could form a basis of whatever this specification will end up being. But in any case, it's something also we would support. So you would have different flavors, and actually, if you go on our sandbox today, you would see sort of different flavors of the API. So we have a UK open banking catalog, we have PSD2 open banking catalog. So, and you can filter by those catalog, and this is how we want to move forward.
Okay.
To move forward, basically supporting those different, and part of the ideas, and I think also what Simon was saying yesterday is, banks will maintain, in our opinion, an ecosystem of APIs, right? Like you will have your premium and internal API where you have like some added value and you just want to keep it for yourself. You will have the sort of free PSD2 APIs. You will have, so I think there's going to be a different range. You'll have the Open Bank project APIs. So there's going to be a range of APIs, and sort of ecosystem of APIs that the banks would be providing.
So just to add to it, platforms such as like ours will help you, maintain all the three. And we look beyond these open bank project, right? We look at partners that you want to really onboard. So these are like different types of APIs that you want to manage.
Yeah. So absolutely, that could be even like not necessarily banking APIs as such. So Capital One in the UK, in the US, they released this API with points, like card points, like when you use your credit cards, right? Like loyalty points, right? So that's also something we would see as well. Maybe like identity APIs as well, to verify identity. So I think as we go, like today, again, like for me, PSD2 open banking is really the hook, right? Like this is regulatory, it's cool, we should do it, but it's really just the first step. There is a lot more, and as we mature, as the industry mature, we'll see a lot more coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult to know how it's going to pan out, but I mean, Open Bank is a really good progenitor project, accelerator for PSD2 and Open Banking. How it adapts to what's happening in the regulatory space is going to be key, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that idea that you, as a bank, you need also to have this agility in building new APIs. So as you said, like using third-party applications, it's solutions. It's very much key. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question. If API is broken, you allow the developers to give you a feedback. But is it that if I subscribe to 5 APIs, out of which one is broken, I get automatically intimated so that I do not have a bad customer journey,
Absolutely. In fact, it's not just the notification we're looking at, right? Is the system resilient to such breakages? So can I spawn another instance if one goes down, right? So that's all part of the the behind the scene, the DevOps aspect of it, which will help you create those instances automatically, and of course notify you. But can I do automatic correction